General Hospital spoilers reveal that when the truth finally reached Harrison Chase, it did not arrive with the force of a confession or the clarity of irrefutable evidence. It seeped into his consciousness like a slow-burning poison, each detail tightening around him until denial became impossible, and the world he had built around Willow's supposed innocence collapsed under its own weight. Chase had spent weeks defending her, insisting to anyone who would listen that Willow would never harm Drew, clinging to a version of her that only existed in memory, a gentle, wounded woman who needed protection, not suspicion. But the truth, once seen, could not be unseen. He stumbled upon the final piece by accident, not because Willow trusted him, but because guilt had frayed her edges and left traces she believed she had hidden. A misplaced object, a timeline that no longer held. A moment of panic when he asked an innocent question, the cracks spread, and her mask slipped just long enough for Chase to finally understand that Willow was the one who had pulled the trigger, that everything she had said to him had been a carefully engineered performance, designed to hold his loyalty hostage. His first reaction was disbelief, followed by a stomach-twisting shame for ever doubting the others. Yet even as his body trembled with betrayal, Willow saw the truth awakening in his eyes and shifted effortlessly into a new performance, one shaped by desperation and sharpened by fear. She approached him not with explanations, but with calculation, stepping closer as though closing the distance could manipulate the narrative itself, whispering that he didn't understand, that everything she did was out of love, and that Michael was the real danger, the one who had orchestrated the entire situation to frame her. Chase wanted to resist, but Willow understood him too well. She knew how to appeal to his compassion, how to weaponize his need to save others, how to ignite the remnants of affection he had buried. She promised him love, a future, a second chance at everything they lost. She let her voice break in all the right places, reached for his hand with trembling fingers, and begged him to believe that Michael had always been the villain manipulating them both. And for a moment, just long enough for dread to settle deeper, Chase hesitated. He had never heard Willow speak with such intensity, such conviction, such alluring vulnerability. Her promise of love was like a hook sinking into the softest part of him, reviving the ache of what he once felt and distorting his judgment as she intended. But beneath her trembling facade, Chase began to sense something predatory, something calculating in the way she watched his reaction, something cold lurking beneath her tears. He realized she was not pleading for help. She was assessing whether she had succeeded in manipulating him, whether he was still malleable, whether he was willing to betray the law and himself for her. When Willow realized his hesitation came from moral conflict rather than emotional surrender, her tactics shifted from seduction to survival. She whispered that if he didn't help her, everything would fall apart, that the police would destroy her life, that the children would be taken from her forever, that Michael would use his influence to bury her so deep she would never surface again. She painted herself as the victim of a grand conspiracy, twisting Michael's past mistakes into motive, shaping every shadow into proof of his guilt. Chase could feel the walls closing in around him as Willow's desperation grew sharper, and the more she spoke, the more he recognized the dangerous evolution within her. This wasn't the woman he had once married. This was someone transformed by fear into something reckless, someone who viewed truth as a threat and him as an obstacle to be managed, persuaded, or destroyed. And that realization chilled him more deeply than the truth of Drew's shooting. Willow started plotting aloud without even realizing she was doing it, speaking of how easily Michael could be blamed, how the police already distrusted him, how Chase could frame their evidence in a way that pointed toward Michael rather than herself. She spoke of manipulating public opinion, of using emotional narratives, of leveraging Chase's position. She spoke as though Chase had already agreed, as though she had already claimed him as her silent accomplice. But when he didn't respond, when his silence stretched along, a dark, flickering panic crossed her face. She knew he had slipped out of her control. She stepped closer again, softening her expression, placing his hand against her cheek as though guiding him into an illusion of tenderness. She told him they could rebuild everything if he just helped her this one last time. She reminded him of the love they once shared, the future they almost had, the family they could still create. She begged him to remember the man he used to be, the man who would have done anything to protect her. But Chase was no longer blinded by memory. He saw now how Willow had used his loyalty to shield herself, how she had twisted his compassion into a tool, how she had relied on his integrity to mask her deceit. And yet, even as clarity settled inside him, the danger intensified. Willow sensed his resolve stiffening, and the softness in her eyes hardened into something threatening. If persuasion failed, there was only one option left: silence him. Chase felt the shift before she even moved the stillness in her body. The calculating glance toward the door, the cold emptiness replacing her tears. Willow understood that he could destroy everything. She could not allow that. She stepped toward him with a deceptively calm expression, speaking gently, promising once more that she loved him, that they could fix this. But Chase heard the threat beneath the tenderness. He realized then how close he was to becoming her next target, just as Drew had been when he became inconvenient. Panic and determination surged through him at the same moment. He needed to escape, to tell someone, to stop Willow before she forged the world in the shape of her lies. But Willow, sensing his fear, advanced with quiet, lethal purpose, whispering that Michael had forced her hand once, and she could not let that happen again. In that moment, Chase understood that love had not blinded him, hope had, and hope was far more dangerous. He saw now the terrifying truth. The woman before him was capable of anything, and if he didn't act quickly, he would not live long enough to expose her. The final horror was not discovering that Willow had shot Drew. It was realizing that she would shoot again, and this time, the target was him. The shift between Chase and Willow does not erupt suddenly, but grows like a storm. That begins with a faint tremor, barely noticeable at first, before swelling into something catastrophic and uncontrollable. Willow senses it long before Chase does, a fragile thread connecting them, woven from memories he never managed to bury and guilt she knows how to manipulate, with surgical precision. In the days following Chase's discovery of the truth about Drew's shooting, his emotions become a battlefield torn between his unwavering moral compass and the lingering devotion he once poured into Willow without hesitation. Willow recognizes the turmoil twisting inside him, and rather than retreat, she leans into it, her mind calculating, adapting, molding herself into whatever Chase needs her to be in order to keep him trapped in her orbit. The more conflicted he becomes, the more she understands that emotional chaos is her greatest advantage. Chase's vulnerability becomes the centerpiece of her plan, and she sharpens it like a blade. She watches him unravel with the eyes of someone who has decided that survival justifies any tactic, no matter how destructive, no matter who gets crushed beneath her desperation. She softens her voice, adjusts her presence, times every moment of trembling sincerity to coincide with the precise instant. He begins to pull away. She weaves a narrative of fear, fear of losing her children, fear of imprisonment, fear of becoming the monster. Everyone believes her to be a narrative Chase instinctively wants to soothe, because he has never been able to turn away from someone in pain. And when the moment finally comes, when she steps close enough for him to feel her breath, when she allows her facade to crumble in just the right way, Chase's inner conflict snaps. It isn't lust that pushes him over the edge, it is longing, nostalgia, guilt, and the remnants of a love story that never received a proper ending. Willow feels the exact moment his resolve breaks. She feels it like a warm pulse beneath her fingertips, like a lock clicking open. What happens next becomes the turning point from which neither of them can return. They end up in bed together, not out of passion, but out of psychological collapse, emotional manipulation, and the illusion of safety that Willow conjures with expert precision. It is not a night of romance, but a night of entanglement, of blurred boundaries and shattered instincts. A night that binds Chase to her in a way that eclipses logic and accelerates his downfall. Willow does not simply seduce him, she ensnares him, wrapping herself around him like a soft, suffocating net, ensuring that once morning comes, he will be tethered to her by a bond stronger than reason and more dangerous than love. For Chase, waking up beside her is a moment of dissonance. The warmth of the blankets, the softness of her breathing, the familiarity of her presence create a powerful illusion of comfort. Yet beneath it all lies a rising dread that gnaws at the edges of his conscience. He knows that what happened was wrong, not morally, but strategically, because it has compromised everything he once stood for. He has crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. given Willow exactly what she needed, a renewed hold over him. The worst part is that he feels relief, as if some part of him wanted this connection back, wanted to pretend that the nightmare surrounding Drew's shooting was just a misunderstanding, that the Willow he once loved is still hidden somewhere inside the manipulative creature she has become. But Willow feels no such confusion. She is sharper now, emboldened, revitalized by the power she has regained. The night has given her leverage far stronger than any lie or alibi. Chase is no longer just a potential threat, he is now compromised, entangled emotionally and physically, unable to act without betraying himself. And Willow wastes no time exploiting that. When Chase begins to pull away, attempting to gather his thoughts, she stops him with a practiced touch, a trembling gesture that pulls at his heart. She embodies fragility so convincingly that even he, who knows the truth, feels compelled to soothe her. But beneath the fragility is a silent warning. He now belongs to her narrative. She begins shaping the aftermath immediately, planting seeds of doubt, weaving new layers of manipulation, suggesting that their intimacy proves something. It proves her innocence. It proves their connection. It proves that Michael is the enemy manipulating them from the shadows. Her words drip into his mind like slow poison, and although Chase fights against them, the memory of the night they shared clouds his instincts. Every time he tries to reassert reason, Willow redirects his emotions, bringing up the past, resurfacing memories of their old love, whispering promises of rebuilding what they lost, of healing together. Each promise is a blade wrapped in silk. But Chase, though weakened, is not completely blind. He begins to sense that Willow is not acting out of love, but out of fear, a fear so consuming that it has mutated into something dangerous, something capable of destroying anyone who threatens her survival. And yet, the more he senses this danger, the more he becomes caught in it, unable to extricate himself without unraveling everything, without exposing the secret they now share. Willow sees his hesitation and doubles down, using his moral conflict as leverage. She pours herself into him again, not physically, but emotionally, casting herself as the woman who needs him, the woman who still loves him, the woman who cannot face the world without him. And Chase, torn between conscience and longing, becomes increasingly unpredictable. He begins acting out of character, defending her more aggressively, isolating himself from colleagues, lashing out at Michael with misplaced fury, sabotaging his own credibility piece by piece. This is the beginning of the disaster. The more Willow pulls him in, the more Chase spirals, losing sight of the truth. He becomes erratic, emotional, volatile, not because he believes Willow, but because he cannot reconcile his desire for her with the monstrous reality she has revealed. Willow, sensing the cracks forming, becomes more dangerous. She whispers of futures where they raise the children together, futures where Drew's shooting is forgotten, futures where Michael pays for everything. Her fantasies become darker, and the more she voices them, the more Chase realizes he is trapped with someone unraveling faster than he can stop her. He knows now that she is capable of anything, but by sleeping with her, he has become part of her story, part of her leverage, part of her alibi. If he exposes her, he exposes himself. If he protects himself, he protects her. Willow has not only seduced him, she has ruined him. And as the days pass, one truth becomes undeniable. Chase is no longer in control of his life. Willow is. And every choice he makes from this moment forward pushes him deeper into the catastrophe, waiting to consume him. The tragedy is that Chase does not yet understand that sleeping with Willow was not a moment of weakness. It was the moment she claimed him fully. The moment his fate became tied to hers. The moment his downfall became inevitable. Brooke Lynn and Michael are the first to feel the full shockwave of the truth. When it finally detonates, tearing through every illusion they still held about Chase and Willow, unraveling whatever fragile hope remained that the situation could be contained. Before it consumed them all, the realization hits them with brutal force. Chase has not only slept with Willow, but has compromised himself so deeply that the fallout becomes impossible to prevent. Brooke Lynn feels the ground shift beneath her, a crushing pressure in her chest as she tries to understand how the man who once preached integrity could fall into a trap so reckless, so destructive, that it borders on catastrophic self-sabotage. Michael, equally stunned, finds himself caught between fury and disbelief, unable to reconcile the Chase he once trusted with the man now drowning in Willow's manipulations. The truth changes everything. It reshapes every alliance, every assumption, every line of trust that once connected them. Brooklyn sees the heartbreak spreading through her life like a stain she cannot scrub away. And Michael sees danger spiraling toward all of them, threatening to engulf their families and tear open wounds they will not recover from. Chase, meanwhile, is spiraling faster than anyone imagined. The consequences of his night with Willow begin to unravel him internally. Before the world even catches up, he loses sleep, loses focus, loses the ability to distinguish right from wrong as Willow tightens her grip around him, feeding him promises, delusions, fantasies that distort his judgment and leave him gasping for stability. The man who once stood on principle has crashed into a version of himself that no longer resembles a hero, but a liability, someone unpredictable, erratic, and dangerously compromised. The adjustments around him begin forming like storm clouds, whispered suspicions, uneasy glances, quiet conversations behind closed doors. Brooklyn watches him unravel with a mix of grief and disappointment, recognizing that this isn't just a mistake, it is the beginning of the end for the man she once believed in. Michael, increasingly implicated in Willow's shifting narrative, becomes fearful not for himself but for what Chase might do next, because a man who has lost everything is capable of anything, especially when he is still clinging to the woman who is dragging him deeper into ruin. Willow's influence expands like a shadow, twisting Chase's emotional fractures into weapons she can manipulate, and the world begins to see the transformation that Brooklyn and Michael feared all along. Chase is slipping beyond reach, and soon the law catches up with him. Dante becomes the first to notice the cracks that Chase can no longer conceal. His erratic behavior, unexplained absences, emotional volatility, and the strange protectiveness he shows toward Willow begin to form a picture no detective can ignore. The PCPD starts quietly gathering fragments of information, discrepancies in Chase's statements, inconsistencies in the timeline, evidence that points not only to Willow's guilt, but to Chase's interference. One by one, the pieces align into a version of events far darker than anyone anticipated. And then it happens, the moment Chase must finally face the consequences of everything Willow pushed him to do. PCPD moves in with grim determination, and Dante, caught between duty and friendship, steps forward to do the job himself, because someone has to, and because allowing anyone else to do it feels like an even deeper betrayal. Chase freezes when he sees Dante approach, a sickening realization spreading through him like ice. He understands instantly that his fate has arrived, that no amount of denial or desperation can save him now. Willow sees the danger too, but this time, even she cannot craft a lie powerful enough to shield him. The officers close in, and Chase feels everything collapse: his career, his reputation, his relationships, the man he used to be. Brooklyn watches from a distance, her heart breaking as she sees the final outcome of the choices he made. Michael watches too, torn between sorrow and vindication, knowing Chase walked willingly into his own destruction the moment he allowed Willow to seduce him back into her web. And Chase, standing in the center of the chaos, finally realizes the weight of what he has done. Not just the night in Willow's bed, not just the betrayal of his badge, but the betrayal of himself. His arrest becomes the symbol of everything he lost, the final consequence of falling under Willow's spell, the disaster that everyone feared but could not stop. In the end, Willow walks free, at least for now, and Chase becomes the one paying the price, the man who let love blind him until he had nothing left to lose. And somewhere within the ruin, Port Charles waits, knowing this is only the beginning of a far darker storm yet to come.